what was the best advice someone gave you? And I think people who are more affluent, who have more social capital, say things like, do what you love. Yeah, that's very nice. That's very nice. But when you're homeless, like, go do what you love. It's like I'm living in a car. So I felt like what I said was different. I said, keep asking questions. That's the best advice to give first-gen students who lived in poverty, students who just feel like, I'm not sure how to navigate this. Then just keep asking questions.
Welcome to another episode of The New College Mindset. I'm your host, Jerica. And today we have on the show Dr. Felicia Darling, a first-generation college student who at the age of 55 achieved her dream and graduated from Stanford University with her PhD in mathematics education. She currently teaches at Santa Rosa Junior Community College and UC Berkeley. In this episode, Dr. Felicia shares proven strategies that you as a first or second generation college student can use to overcome challenges in college and make your graduation dreams a reality. If you're needing that extra motivation to keep going in college, we made this episode for you. Let's get started. So Dr. Felicia, welcome to the New College Mindset. How are you this afternoon?
I'm super excited to be here, and I'm so glad you're doing this, and I'm glad I can be part of the legacy of this podcast.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are? And then if you could think back to your time in college, what is your favorite college experience?
Well, since this is about first-gen college students, I'll just say I started at Community College. That's where my first college courses were taken. And but actually I started wandering around, wondering how to go to college, and then got into Community College. And I'm like, oh, okay. And Community College helps you kind of teaches you how to college. And from there, I was able to go to an open access college, get my math degree, then a master's. And then finally, as you said, at 55, I found my way over to Stanford and realized my dream. I had wanted a doctorate for a really long time, since I was 14, but, dreams deferred, poverty, first gen, kind of lacking the support of how to get that. And so I finally did get my doctorate 2016. And one of my dreams was to write, and I'm on my third book, right? My first book was Teaching It, that came out. And then my second book, Empathy Unchained, just came out, along with my Empathy Unchained DEI cards. I'm just really happy to have made that journey from thinking I'm never going to have a PhD, never going to be a writer, never going to finish college, to oh, I did it. I'm still kind of in the phase of, wait, did I do it?
You did it. Yeah. And to have so many books under your belt, you're doing it. It's not oh, is this a fluke? No, you were for real doing this. Can you think back to your time in college and maybe your favorite college experience? And it could be at any of the varying stages, whether it's community college or your time all the way up to getting your PhD, but something that you're you know what, I really enjoy doing this.
Ooh, there's a lot to choose from there. Jeez. I mean, I feel like every time I got in, when I got into CCV, Community College of Vermont, I was like, wow, I'm here. I think every time I did something that I thought was previously impossible, that's kind of my best moment. Let me tell you about the Fulbright. So I was at Stanford, and I didn't come from Cornell and Princeton when I was at Stanford getting my PhD in 2011. I came from a state college that was open access. And I knew I wanted to go to Mexico and do research in math ed, in Spanish, and in a village, and find out some of that cultural assets that occurred in the village. And I'm like, but I can't do that. I don't have any money, right? Poverty casts a long shadow over your life. And so I was like, well, I can't do that. And someone said to me, well, why don't you get a Fulbright? And I turned to them and I said, I can't get a Fulbright, because I was first gen and come from this poor background. I'm like, no one I ever knew got a Fulbright. No one I ever knew ever even in my family went to college. And so I was like, no, I can't do that. So this was an example of where all of a sudden I peered over that little fence of my own making and was like, maybe I can do that. Because I was like, oh, these other people get Fulbrights. I can't do that. And so I feel like every time I kind of peered over my limited, the fence that it basically represents my limiting beliefs, that was my favorite moment. There's a lot of them, because as you go to college and you proceed and you progress, those moments are my favorite. And those are the moments, of course, I like helping students experience.
I think that's a beautiful place to like reflect because we've all had those moments, when you believe you believe that you can't, and then someone says, but maybe you can, and then you do it and you're like, whoa, I did that. Like I just did that. That was awesome. That feeling, if we could just bottle that up, that is such an awesome feeling. And so you've spent a lot of your career working in community colleges and in that space, and we have that in common. So Dr. Felicia is working at community colleges now. I've worked at community colleges, several of them in the past. Can you talk to our listeners about where did that passion for community college come for you? Maybe some statistics or things to say, why you have been passionate of writing, working, studying in community colleges.
If community colleges didn't exist, I would never have gone to college. That's just a fact. And I like bringing high quality, inclusive instruction to community college so that students feel like they belong there. Because for many students, they kind of fall into community college, and that's their first step towards going to university. And as I mentioned earlier, students who feel like they belong in college stay in college. So I like to be there in that classroom on that first, and sometimes it can be a stumbling first step, as it was for me to community college. I feel like community college found me. I didn't find it. It just was an accident, a fantastic accident. So I like being part of that journey for people. And for first-gen students, sometimes, you don't have your family, not no one in your family went to college, no one in your family has a doctorate. You don't know anyone has a doctorate. How do you talk to someone who has a doctorate? I like being there to help navigate that part, helping students to figure out, how do you college? How do you talk to a professor?
Yeah.
How do you do things that you've never done, no one in your family's ever done, and people in your social circle aren't doing? So I like community college because I feel like those students might stop going to college. Students who feel like they don't belong might just not go, or they tried, but it didn't work out because they didn't want to connected to a counselor. So that's why I like community college, because students are super determined, and you just need a little bit of connecting with resources, and bam, their whole life kind of explodes, and they're super successful, and they're looking over that fence, right? They're looking over the fence to further than they ever thought they could.
I view community colleges like that. If you have that belief that I can maybe do it, you go, you make that leap there, and then they need someone like you. That's what I'm saying. Maybe they should clone you, you know what I mean? To grab them and say, you do belong here, and let me show you the avenues so that you can be successful. And so that's really awesome to hear why you're passionate about community colleges. And so in your book, Teaching It, Breakout Moves That Break Down Barriers for Community College Students. Hopefully our audience can see this if you're viewing this online. You talk so much about the growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. It just made me think about all the negative things I told myself, while in college that maybe became a barrier. One of those things was, I'm not good at math. And maybe if I hadn't been thinking that, I'd be in a different position than I am today. But can you talk to us a little bit about the growth mindset and how it relates to college?
Yeah. So anybody can have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset about specific areas. It's not limited to people who are first-gen college students by any means. But probably one of the best things you can do for yourself is dream big, right? Instead of thinking, well, I can't, like me with the Fulbright, I'm like, I can't get a Fulbright. I'm not that person,
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, switch that I can't to maybe I can, or use the word yet, right? That's the other thing. It's like, when I can't comes out of your mind and out of your head, some sort of stuck narrative, maybe say maybe. Like, I can't go to college, right? Maybe I can. I can't go to college yet. Using the word yet, maybe I can. That's a great way to shift any kind of limiting beliefs we might have about our own success, right? Towards more of a growth mindset. But we all have that, especially if you have a history of, me, I was in poverty. I encountered a lot of difficulties, escaped 2 armed sexual assaults, was homeless. So I might have some mindsets that are pretty limiting, like, well, there's how am I going to get a Fulbright and go to Mexico when in my brain I'm still thinking, how do I keep stable housing, right? So there's realities that feed some of this fixed mindset, but I also think we need to leave that little sliver of possibility. I can't do this. I'm never going to do this. I'm not a math person. Throw that word yet in there and see how different that feels. I am not a math person. I'm never going to be good at math. How about I'm not a math person yet? I'm never going to get an A yet. You know what I mean? That never is that tells you there's something wrong. And to keep asking yourself, well, why are you doing this? You're in I was at Stanford. I don't know how much you can say on here, but when I was at Stanford, I definitely I thought of selling my body for money. I was in I didn't want to go into debt. I was really stuck. And, I just had to keep asking myself, I almost dropped out so many times because of money. And I just kept back to, why are you doing this? Why is this so important? Why do you have this drive? Connecting to the why. And then thinking about, well, is there something you can do? Just always looking for, is there some sort of move you can make? I ended up starting a math tutoring business, and that got me through. But
Wow.
being open to the possibility and saying, well, I'm not there yet, and well, could I possibly do something different?
I had a question too about that with, people, a lot of first gen feel very isolated, as we're going through the process of college. How did you have people around you that were speaking that positivity into you? Like, what allowed you to say, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna make this math program. I'm gonna start my own business. I'm gonna apply to this. I'm gonna apply. Like, were there people around you, or did you feel like you just did it very much solo?
Great question. Uh, Studies have shown that African American students, as well as students who are first gen, tend to do it alone, right? Maybe they don't
Mm-hmm.
trust the systems that have disenfranchised them, and they tend to do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
And you do have to change that. If you've been bootstrapping
Mm.
yourself, there is a certain amount you have to change. I had to change that when I was getting my PhD. And this is a classic thing. They say African American students will go in their room and do their calculus homework, take them twice as long as the students working in groups. Uh, and so there is a certain amount of things I have to do and a student has to do to
Mm.
kind of maybe say, maybe I can trust some people and work in a group. Maybe everything doesn't have to be done just by me alone. I had to
Mm.
make
Mm-hmm.
that shift. On the other hand, there's real othering that occurs in every environment, whether it's about class or skin color. There's othering that occurs, and I think it's good to admit that, and then think about how you're going to navigate that. I found myself moving towards people, and this could be a problem too. You don't want to move
Mm-hmm.
only towards people, like people who are first gen, because they may not
Mm-hmm.
have enough assets for you, but maybe you have like
Yes.
first
Mm-hmm.
gen allies. So I would move away from people that make you feel bad or whatever, and then making you feel somehow othered. Move towards the people with whom you have a connection. One of my best friends was a Muslim Pakistani woman there who comes from a pretty affluent, educated family, but she just had the magical quality to pull people in. And so she's the one that I said, well, I don't know what I can do. I want to do my research. She said, get a Fulbright. I'm like, I can't. She goes, why not? Like, because she didn't have the limiting belief. Our family was educated. They had money. She also didn't have that limiting belief for me. She wasn't othering me. She believed in me. So just, whether move away from people that make you feel bad. And believe me, class is something people do notice about you. And if you feel like I
Yeah.
don't feel good there, don't hang around with those people and go to people, but you can't always go with what's familiar, because if I always hung around
Yes.
with people who were first gen low income, I'd still be in Vermont getting food stamps and on Section 8 housing. That's where I would be if I only was comfortable being with people who were exactly like me. And the only thing that gave me courage, I had some people who weren't exactly like me, but were empathetic towards me and didn't other me. And because you need new information. Yeah, yeah. And so, but othering's real, discrimination's real, and you want to find people who are like you, but you also need to have allies who can bring resources to you and social capital.
that mix, having that nice mix of, I have a little bit of safety, but hey, maybe I'm going to try this new organization that maybe I like it, maybe I don't. Let me try this. And maybe I'll meet some people there that are really awesome. Or maybe I'll take this class and maybe it'll go, you know what I mean? Like having that nice mix. I feel that's kind of what you're saying as well, because you might meet someone there that can give you a new idea, or they have that gift like you talked about of bringing you in and making you feel that you can like do anything, and you need
Yeah.
those people in your life.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, really good thought. In your experience, you have been in the community college space for a very, very long time. And there was a recent article that came out that said that community college students, 80% when they go in, want to graduate and transfer and go to a 4-year degree and complete that. But only 16% of those students are actually doing it. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts on how first gen students or college students in general can make that leap from community college to the 4-year. Any things that you've seen in your breadth of experience working with college students that has been successful in helping students get from that 2-year to the 4-year to graduate that you did yourself. Any thoughts on that? Because those are some pretty sobering statistics.
Yeah, and they may be a little misleading in that I believe that people who are first gen, especially first gen low income, sometimes just take longer. So just because they're like, look, after these 2 years, look, only the people who weren't first gen, went on, and the ones who weren't first gen didn't go on. Maybe it's just taking them longer. And sometimes it's just a reality. Like I was 55 when I got my PhD.
Yeah.
Because it did take a long time, right? You have kids and you're already kind of, if you're low income first gen, there's just, poverty casts a long shadow. And if you lived in poverty, there might be trauma then you have to heal from. So it can take a longer time. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But never is a whole different thing, never going on to a 4-year. That being said, and you can't control, you might not be able to control what state you're in or whatever, but like in California, it's very articulated. It's very articulated going from community college to Berkeley to the CSK, California State University. That's an important feature if you can get it in a community college. And also, the biggest thing I think with first gen college students, especially, is they don't get help. They're going to do it all by themselves. They're going to bootstrap up. Go to that academic counselor the first day. If there's transfer counselors, go the first day, because if you don't, you might be staying at the community college longer than you need to be because my friend went and he said this. My brother went there and those guys are great. You love them, but listen. Go and see the academic counselor as often as possible, because you want to at least have the academic part that way paved. And go to financial aid office. There's definitely ways to game the system in each state because of the way the funding is. Like in California, if you spend too many years at community college, you're using up some of your funding for your 4-year experience. So that's something you need to know about early on in financial aid. That's why I bring financial aid people to class. That's how I found out about that. So going to financial aid office, talking to a transfer counselor, and a lot. Don't go like I went my first class I took. No, go twice a semester if you have to. It's free. Those people are getting paid $100 an hour. That's money you're not using if you don't go there. So academic counselors a lot, because you got to do your ed plan over and over, and find out how articulated the process is from your community college to the state college, if that's where you're going. Find out how the money works. How does the financial aid work when you go from community college to a state college? So those are all things that I don't care if you're first gen or not. That's like complicated and weird and new, and you're like, what? When they came to my class, I was like, what? So you don't want to waste your time 3 years at community college if that 1 year at community college now supplants the year you could be getting paid to go to in the university. So yeah, you do need to know the ins and outs of the financial aid in your state, wherever you are. So financial aid office, and the question is like, how do I pave the way to go to transfer to the CSU as easily as possible? That's your
Hmm.
question for everywhere. You're going to
Hmm.
the academic counselor, you're going to the transfer counselor, you're going to
Hmm.
financial aid. Um, and you may have to have a planned stop. A stop, a pause
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you never go to university. I definitely had pauses, took me
Uh-huh.
forever, right?
Uh-huh.
But that's okay. I kept that dream alive. I still want to do that.
Hmm.
Don't give up.
The next question I wanted to talk a little bit about is yourself, how you have mentored students. In your time in community college, you have mentored, I know, a ton of students. Is there some commonalities that you have seen on things that you are usually discussing with a student that you could share with us that you have, talked to students as you're mentoring them over and over again? Are there any commonalities?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, and it's a good quality to have in a mentor. It's kind of like the woman Saima Malik from Stanford who told me just get a
Hmm.
Fulbright. Right? Basically, you want a mentor that cuts through the BS of your blindness about how amazing you are. They don't even see that. Like, I
Mm.
see a student, like a couple students, I'm like, oh, you should get a doctorate. And they're like, no, I
Mm.
guarantee no one's ever said that to them anywhere on the earth. But I could
Mm.
see that in them. So I think I'm very good at seeing people's potential and where they're going. And so I'm like, well, you should just go get a doctorate. Like, really? How do you do that? Here, let me connect you with someone who has a doctorate in sociology. So I think a lot of a good mentor doesn't, they're kind of not seeing all your doubt and fear. They're just kind of like going, well, why don't you just do this? They can see above the fence you built for themselves, for yourself. And they're like, oh, what about that goal way over there? Because you're like, well, what goal? I'm down here below the fence. So I think that's part of it. They can see your potential. They can help you actualize your potential, and you feel that. And they say big dreams that you're like, no, you might leave going, that's ridiculous. Then it wears on you. You're like, wait, why not me? Why can't I do that? Right? Why is that for everybody else? So I think that's a big part is they really believe in your capacity to excel and they're dreaming big. They're giving you ideas for big dreams. It may not be the perfect dream for you, but it's a bigger dream than you are going to have on your own. So now it opens up the door to dream other big dreams. So I think that's a big one. But actually, what was it? Claude Steele, stereotype feedback is like, all right, so you're dreaming big for them. You're saying, I believe you can do that. No problem. I'm not even listening to your doubts. You also have to give them critical feedback. It's like no one's going to go from, they're 18 years old. No one went to college to like, they're on the road to doctorate, right? That takes steps. So you also have to give critical feedback. I notice in class, you don't come to every class. I notice you probably should come to every class if you want to achieve that dream. Should probably, go see your academic counselor. Basically, a good
Hint, hint.
mentor, good mentor gives you critical feedback. They have high expectations for you.
Mm.
They can help you dream big. But they're also giving you critical feedback. And the next thing you should really do is figure out how to write a better email to your professor. This is like texted with all
Mhm.
lowercase, and it's like, "Hey, darling." I
Mhm.
mean, one time someone emailed me
Mhm.
that they said, "Hey, darling," because that's my last name, and I was like, I just was like, that's not going to help you in the future. So I'm going to right now give you critical feedback. In fact, I
That's
gave the
happening
whole,
now.
yeah, I gave everyone in class a little bit of help that day. I was like, so I just want to let you know if you're communicating with a professor, like, don't do it from your phone. Hey, darling, da da da. It's like,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
funny. Yeah. So yeah, you want someone who can be honest, give you critical feedback. They can dream big for you, and they definitely believe in you.
You talked about in your book, it talks about everyone struggles in their craft, their learning process. Complex tasks are good for the brain, and we can get better at anything by expending effort and developing new strategies.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that as far as doing different things, doing hard things, and how that can help our brains kind of get better. Cause I think it's super nerdy, but I thought that was really
Yeah.
awesome in the book.
That's an important part of growth mindset. I mean, sometimes growth mindset can be used for bad. It actually can be used to blame people who
Mm.
are stuck in a system of discrimination. But I'm going to talk about this
Hmm.
because it's a really important part. It's the difference between I'm not a math person, thinking I'm just not a math person, and I haven't figured out how to be a powerful math learner yet, right? So you get a shift
Mm,
from it's a definite thing, I'm never going to be able to do that, to this is a
mhm,
process that you get better at over time by
hmm,
expending
mhm,
effort. That's the mindset shift that's important for the growth mindset. Students who have a fixed mindset in math, for instance, they'll tell you,
mhm.
I had a student the other day. I can't do math in community college. I can't do math. I'm never going to do
I
math.
see.
Don't ask me to do math. And so there's a so this person though engaged in complex tasks, math tasks that were increasingly more
Mhm,
difficult with support. And now I said to her, we were in class and I said, "Oh, remember you don't like math." She goes, "I said that once a long time ago." I mean, it was like 2 weeks ago. But she had already made a shift away from my
mm,
identity is I hate math, I can't do math, to, well, I can do this kind of math, because it was
mhm, mhm,
scaffolded. And so that's the shift from having a fixed mindset about yourself and a growth mindset about yourself. And that goes with college too, right? Like there's no way
mhm,
I can do Stanford, right? There's no way I can do that to,
mhm,
all right, I can do it, but there's all these strategies. I'm going to have to learn that. Some of these other people who went to Princeton and Cornell, they're not going to have to learn, but
mhm,
I have to learn them.
mhm.
And that's the shift again to growth mindset. Instead of, I don't belong here, it's like, I can develop strategies over time. So I bet by the end of the semester, I feel like I belong here. I say that to my students at Berkeley. It's like, find the groups. So at the end of the first semester, you're finding groups, you're finding people, you do feel like you belong here because it can be done. You don't show up and go, I don't belong here. That's it. You can be like, I wonder if there's some strategies I can develop, connections I can make, expending effort, doing some research so that finding some mentors so that at the end of the semester, I actually feel like I belong here more.
It's kind of like giving yourself grace to allow yourself to go through the process. And it's going to be icky and it's going to be like all of these different feelings, but there is beauty on the other side and winners happen on that other side, So go through that process, give yourself that grace, and get the assistance that you need as you're going through that process so that you don't stop in the middle of the process. And I think that I just think back to my own high school experience in different parts of college that you just I guess I'll stop, I'll stop versus wait, everybody goes through this, maybe they go through it in different levels, but everybody goes through this. It's a good thing you're going through
Mhm,
this is
mhm.
tough, you're going through this. Don't quit,
Right,
keep
right.
going.
Yeah.
And
And
so
that
I
goes
think
back.
that's
Oh,
really
sorry.
awesome.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
Yeah,
go
that
ahead, go
goes
ahead,
back
go
to
ahead.
the
Yeah.
asking yourself why as well, right? It's like, well, why am I doing this? And also never comparing. So one of the things I learned at
Mm.
Stanford, I know it's my most recent experience, don't compare yourself to others. So you might have someone in class
Mm.
who's raising their hand, they have all the answers, they get an A on the
Yeah.
test, and they're like on the math test, and like, I got an A, I didn't even study. They might be lying. So never compare yourself to
Mhm.
someone. If someone got an A
Mm.
on a math test, guess what? At some point in their life, they had to learn that, whether they learned it 2 years ago in ninth
Mm.
grade
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
11th
Mhm.
grade, or they learned it today, or they spent 5 hours last night frantically learning it. They had to learn it. No one's born knowing calculus. Like I guarantee
Mhm.
that. If
Mhm.
you're taking derivatives, you
Mhm.
learned it.
Mhm.
So that's the lie sometimes we tell ourselves. They're like, that person can do anything. Look
Mm.
at them. But maybe they're lying, first of all. And second
Mhm.
of all,
Mhm.
maybe they put a lot of effort in 12th grade and really nailed calculus. So now in their freshman year,
Mhm.
it's not hard for them. But at some point, I guarantee they put effort in. And so that's sometimes a lie when we compare ourselves. That's the lie. Like, I'm not a math person. Look at that person raising their hand. Yeah, maybe they spent 10 hours last night. Maybe they have a private tutor. Maybe they had one in 12th grade. Maybe they're just lying to you. So, yeah, never, you don't know really what's going on in their lives. And
Yeah.
if they know calculus, they learned it at some point. They had to put that effort in because it's effort to learn. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and now, now the opportunity to learn is in front of you right now. So what are you gonna do with this opportunity? Are you gonna put in the work so that you too can be that person in a few years? It's just like, I got my hand up, I got all the answers, or you're just gonna let it pass you by? I think that is
Yeah.
amazing advice and super encouraging, I think, to our first gen listeners. And I want to talk a little bit about another part that comes up in the book, as far as connecting with your students. So you mentioned that students that call professors that call students have lead to a higher retention rate, because if you feel like you belong, you stay. And I wanted to kind of pick your brain into some of the strategies that you tell your students on how to build community between themselves and the professor. It could be themselves and their academic advisor, because those connections are super important for them to be able to stay in college and be successful.
Yeah, first thing I would say is don't pick a professor who sucks. I think that's actually really good advice. Nowadays, you can find a million ways to suss professors out before you take them.
Yes.
And don't take one who sucks, because there's plenty of them
Yeah.
who don't suck. And then when you get into the classroom, yeah, that's going to be a little scary for a student who's never talked to someone who has a doctorate or something, and they're in a family that just doesn't happen. That's going to be a little intimidating. I remember at one point I asked a professor, I went up to him and I said, listen, he seemed nice. And I went up to him and I said, I don't know how to talk to professors. I was wondering if I could come to your office hours just to practice talking to a professor.
Wow.
Like I literally did that, and that worked out okay. And I would also say, I mean, professors like me, because I'm in the front row, I'm showing up.
Yeah.
My face says I am sucking in everything you're saying. I'm raising my hand, but you might not be an extrovert. You don't want to raise your hand. That's fine, but you're there. People can tell you're listening and participating. I mean, some professors are jerks. I'm sorry. If they're a jerk, there might not be as much you can do, but shop, first of all, that's your right to shop for the best professor. You can also change classes. If you see someone who just seems really sympathetic, ask them if you can practice with them. Like, oh, I don't know how to talk to a professor. Can I come in? And, they can say no, that could hurt, but you probably are asking them because you feel like they're probably going to say yes. And then you do that. I started with that one person who kind of scared me because they were like so talented and And then I was like, oh, okay, now I can talk to anybody, because I'm like, oh, because I practiced it. It's a skill. That's the growth mindset thing. I'm not a person who can talk to professors too. It's just a skill. Guess what? All the people around me who went to Cornell, whose parents have doctorates, they learned that skill. They just learned it when they were 4, not when they were 21. They had to learn that skill. Everybody who has a skill had to learn it. And so you're just playing catch up if you're in college in your first gen. That doesn't mean you still might have a lot. You probably do have a lot of skills the other students don't have. And some people are going to appreciate that. It's not like you don't have any skills. You have a lot of skills that a lot of the students don't have. But you also have some skills that they already learned when they were 4. They're going to like, hi, doctor, when they were 4 years old, shaking hands with someone who was a doctor. Like, I didn't even know a doctor until like a person in social life.
Exactly.
So, you're like, so it's breaking it down. It's just a skill. And you're going to have to figure out how to do it.
The other question that I had, and I think this goes into your new work that you're doing with empathy, you talked a lot about how trauma impacts a lot of people in this world. I think you mentioned like 70% of people are impacted with trauma. And we know that is very true for our first and second gen college students. Do you, from your new writings and your new work, advice that or tactics that you've used to help you overcome or work through trauma and that you think would be helpful for students?
Yes. So I see a lot of students that are like me. I was off and on homeless. That's not great. Neglected a bit as a youth. And like I said, I escaped 2 attempted armed sexual assaults. And, those are just some of the things. I love a list of like 100 traumatic events that happened to me.
Wow.
It's very hard to move on and be successful and free in an environment and make choices and be positive when you're kind of in a stuck narrative about your ability, or you're just, triggered a lot. You have a lot of anxiety or depression because you're in a certain environment and, you're like I had that student who was triggered by the cold. We didn't have heat and I knew she was homeless because I had also the same feeling. We were both triggered and we were not acting our best selves at all. In fact, she started yelling at me. I didn't kick her out of class, but I helped her. I got her psychological services because I knew what that was. I was cold and all of a sudden I was triggered. And so if you have triggers, right, those have to be addressed. Those have to be healed because they're going to interfere with your ability to follow your true north. If you're tethered to past pain and past forgotten hurts, and I say forgotten because they're not really forgotten. They might be legislating your behavior. You really need to address those things, and the good news is community college offers free psych services too. And that stigma hopefully will dissipate because you want to be mentally well. You want to have food, you want to have housing, but you also want to be mentally well, particularly if you've lived through poverty that can really, really harm you. It harmed me. And I think it really does help you to be motivated when you feel good and you're working on being more free from those triggers. So that's a strategy I use with students a lot because I teach math. A lot of people have math trauma. They really do. And so a strategy I picked up in trauma healing therapy, with a psychotherapist was this idea of like, instead of having this fighting with the anxiety, right? Like, especially test taking anxiety around math or something, instead of fighting with it, like, oh no, I don't like this. It's happening again. You're doing this dance where you're trying to duck and maybe give it a punch and, you're engaged. It's hard to get an A in class when you're doing this with your anxiety. That takes a lot of energy dancing with your anxiety. So one of the strategies that worked with this math student was I said, okay, when you have math anxiety, test taking anxiety, when that comes up, you're going to take that anxiety and you're going to put it in the passenger side seat of the car. Give it a juice box, give it a pat on the shoulder and say, okay, it's okay. You're here. You comfortable? Got a juice box, pat on the shoulder. Let me buckle your seatbelt, but I'm driving. I'm going to drive. I'm going to take the test. You can be here. I'm going to make sure you're okay, but I'm going to be driving the car. Yeah. In my minivan, it had rage. It had despair. It had a lot of people were buckled up back there. The Panther was the rage. Exactly. But I think that's a great strategy that I use with students, but I tell my students about that and so they can use it. It really does help because you don't want anxiety or depression or fear to eclipse what you're doing in the moment. You're in school. It's the best time of your life. Learning is fantastic, but you don't want anxiety to hijack that. So you just got to put it in the passenger seat. You're still driving. You're taking the test. You're going into the class. You're going to one that's presenting tomorrow. That anxiety can be there. It's taken care of, pat on the back, maybe even draw a picture. And so that is a strategy that I think works for me. And it works for math students who are anxious. And I think it would work for someone also doing a presentation. It's great imagery. It's physical. You can actually, pat that little anxious person on the head.
I thought that would be really helpful for our students to hear because the biggest part, I think, in that whole example is recognizing you have it, right? And not hiding from it. Some people fight it. Some people just ignore it. Yeah. And then when it rears its ugly head, you're like, oh, what is that? You know what it is, but it's like you've been ignoring it. And so for you to say, you know what, you need to recognize what it is. Now let's place it in a spot where we now have control. I think it's just really beautiful and helpful. And it's just great imagery, I thought. So thanks for sharing that with us. And we've talked a lot in this short time about your book, teaching it in breakout moves that break down barriers for community college students. And I think we've done a really good job, but I want to give you some time to talk a little bit about the cards that you have. Dr. Felicia has a lot of other resources that can be helpful. So I want to give that time to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly an educator of educators. Obviously, I'm an educator of students as well. And then, you learn from educating students and you try to share that. So my book, though, the DEI, so I have Empathy Unchained DEI conversation cards. And those are prompts for any organization. It could be a student group. It could be Google. It could be college. It could be grade K through 4 teacher meetings. They're prompts to help people have those courageous conversations that can change practices so that organizations or groups or programs are more inclusive, they're more equitable, they're more accessible, they help people feel like they belong. And now I'm learning the empathy circles so I can actually work more with groups around that. So they're having empathetic conversations where people feel heard, right? That's the first piece. So that's the Empathy Unchained DEI conversation deck. Excited about that. They just came out. The book is Empathy Unchained, Heal Your Trauma, Uplift the World. And that one's about healing your trauma, mindfulness techniques, but also therapy, a lot about therapy and a lot of history of trauma and how it really is contributing to a lot of problems in the world, like homelessness and child poverty, just a lot of problems, a lot of hate groups, that kind of thing. So the idea is that like, hey, if we heal ourselves, we're present and we can listen, we can be an empathetic listener. We can do something about the world. We can be kind and empathetic. And we can also follow our own true north. If we're triggered and we're anxious and depressed and trying to get that next cigarette, that next cookie to make some bad thoughts go away, we're not really pursuing our dreams with full force, right? You can pursue your dreams with full force when you have your full embodied present moment self ready to move forward. And so that's the other part of Empathy Unchained, Heal Your Trauma, Uplift the World.
Dr. Felicia, I have truly enjoyed our conversation. And always before I let my guests go that come on the show, do you have any words of wisdom, any parting thoughts for our first or second generation college students that are navigating their time in college that you think would be helpful for them to hear?
You know what? Here's my big piece of advice. When I was at the community college, they interviewed all the new people. They said, what was the best advice someone gave you? And I think people who are more affluent, who have more social capital, say things like, do what you love. Yeah, that's very nice. That's very nice. But when you're homeless, go do what you love. It's like I'm living in a car. So I felt like what I said was different. I said, keep asking questions. That's the best advice to give first gen students who lived in poverty, students who just feel like, I'm not sure how to navigate this. Then just keep asking questions. If you're more introverted, write those questions down, send them via email to your professor, ask someone who you think would let you know, but keep asking questions, be curious, because that's the best way to keep overcoming those limited beliefs and getting a step up, peering over the fence, seeing another dream. Then you achieve that dream, seeing another one. You have to keep asking questions, unless you already know how to do it. I mean, but then you can't do anything new. So when you internalize that quest for new knowledge and you keep asking questions, like right now I have a PhD. Now I'm going to write books. Now I'm going to be trained in doing empathy. I'm still keep asking questions. It's like the beginner's mind. So you show up in a new place. They're like, well, she has a PhD from Stanford. She's going to act like she knows everything. I'm like, what is this? What is this? How do we do this? Can you help me figure this out? So that's a great thing to internalize. Keep asking questions. That's how you get mentors. That's how you network. That's how you're going to be successful. I mean, unless you already know. You already know it all. You don't have to keep asking questions. But keep asking questions, you'll get past your dream. Whatever you thought was the biggest dream you could dream, you keep asking questions, you move past that dream because you're like, well, what about this? Could this happen? How do you do that? How does that person do that? How are they a millionaire? So I think that's probably the best advice I can give to people, maybe anybody, but certainly people who are first gen and or low income students.
That is amazing advice. Just keep asking questions. And that's where things are unlocked. And that's where you meet people. And that's where you have the aha moments. And that's where you have, let me pivot here and do this and do that. So I cherish that. I think that was really, 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 really good info that you shared with us. And Dr. Felicia, I want to say thank you so much for coming on The New College Mindset. I truly enjoyed having you on and us talking about your books as well as your college experience and different techniques to navigate it. And I think that our first and second gen college students are going to find this super helpful. And so without further ado, just want to say thank you again. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much. Goodbye. It was wonderful.